What if there were a simpler way to decide and communicate? One that saved time, protected your energy, and reduced your emotional drain. Physicians don't just make decisions, they navigate constant communication through emails, messages, meetings, and conversations. Everyone carries a cost in time, energy, emotional bandwidth, and over time, urgency, perfectionism, over-responsibility, self-judgment can quietly turn routine decisions and interaction into decision fatigue, decision debt, and being stuck in indecision. Thanks for joining us today at the Healing Medicine Podcast. Who are you listening to? I am Dr. Jessie Mahoney, and my co-host is Dr. Ni-Cheng Liang. We are two board-certified physicians who bring decades of experience to the conversation about wellness. If you crave more ease and aspire to rediscover your love for medicine and life, one mindful step at a time, you are in the right place. We hope you'll love today's episode, and if so, please share it. A reminder that nothing in our podcast is medical advice. Welcome to today's episode, Intention as a Filter for Simpler Decision. This topic is one that I am sharing later on today with the Charting Champions group, and I wanted to share it here with my listeners as well, because why not? So this topic started as simpler ways to decide how to reduce decision fatigue and create ease, efficiency, and fulfillment in medical practice. But what that simplifies to is, with intention as the filter, everything is simpler. So why does this matter? Having a simple, intentional filter for decision-making is an absolute game changer. And I work with so many people who struggle with decision-making and feel stuck. They don't have a clear way of making decisions. And one of the things that I coach on in Transition Well and in leadership and in relationship and marriage coaching and at retreats is making decisions and how to make decisions. So many of us struggle with making decisions, not because we're bad decision makers, but because of many of the underlying thought patterns that we have that get us into trouble. They make decisions hard to make. We catastrophize. We worry about potential consequences. We can't make a mistake. We have to get it right. And so I'm hoping by sharing today a practical, more intention-based framework for making decisions, that it will reduce friction, keep you unstuck, and help protect your energy. And energy is one of the key things for making good decisions. And when we are depleted and out of energy, decisions seem hard. And making decisions more simple actually can give us more energy. So it's a full circle loop. And when daily decisions feel simpler, steadier, and more aligned, we actually can increase our capacity and move through our work with more steadiness, alignment, and ease. And for those of you who aren't aware, I teach yoga, and I taught yoga this morning on the topic of growing capacity. And many of the topics that I'm going to weave into this podcast are interrelated because we talked in yoga about growing capacity physiologically and from intention and mindset. And you can't have one without the other. So there are some prerequisites to making decisions simpler and to choosing intentions that are necessary as well, that we'll talk a little bit about. So for those of you new to the podcast, I know most of you are longtime listeners, but I thought this would be a good chance to introduce myself. And maybe some of you listening don't know some of these things about me. So I am a board-certified pediatrician, and I spent 2 decades working as an inpatient and outpatient pediatrician at the Permanente Medical Group, or Kaiser Permanente. And I also spent almost my entire 2 decades in leadership, both as a site chief, assistant chief, module leader, and chief of physician wellness. So I like to label myself as a leadership junkie. I am addicted to improving culture, workflow, sustainability, strategy, fixing problems. And I thought that by being a leader, I could fix problems from the inside. But what I discovered over time is that fixing problems from the outside and from within you as the inside is where the answer is. And what I began to realize after years and years in physician wellness and working on mindfulness and coaching myself is that unless we address problematic patterns in ourselves, like challenges making decisions, over responsibility, depletion, lack of boundaries, system change is not going to change things. We have to have system change and personal change, and they go hand in hand. Now, part of the problem now is that the system is so dysfunctional, it is depleting us to degrees that it makes it super hard for us to handle ourselves well. We are so depleted and in such fight or flight that we're more reactive than usual. And this is adding to the problem. And so we do need to fix the systems. And we need to work on ourselves. And until those systems are fixed, which clearly is going to take a while, we need to figure out we want to figure out how to grow capacity, have some clarity, begin to trust ourselves and be steady so that when system change finally happens, we can enjoy it or we can be a part of that system change. And so for the last 6 years, I have been working from outside the system at Pause and Presence as a coach for physicians mostly, and a few clinicians and a few friends of physicians. I do a lot of leadership coaching, transition coaching, marriage coaching, parent coaching, because they all interweave with each other. And I bring in multiple coaching modalities, and I'm going to talk about many of those today. That's the background. So physiology, neuroscience, mindfulness, and the way that we're taught to think as physicians, which comes from my 20 years of leading physician wellness and being a physician and struggling myself. So the approach that I try to bring is this practical, very deeply human approach that focuses on alignment, energy, and sustainable practices. There's a big component of mindfulness and self-compassion. And so what I aim to focus on today and in almost every podcast and in all of my work is how we pay attention to what's in our control, to focus on what's in your control, let go of what's not in your control, and stop trying to control things that are not in your control. So what is in our control is how we make decisions, how we communicate, and how we show up. And if we can focus on those, we can manage our energy much more effectively. We can respond and actually proactively choose how we want to show up for things. And then we will have the capacity to change systems if we want to. And so for those of you who might be new listeners, I do this through one-on-one coaching. I do it through small group coaching, topic-based small group coaching. And shortly, Transition Well, the spring cohort is going to begin. Leading from the Heart, the spring cohort is going to begin. And I'm bringing back Mindful Love for the first time in a couple of years. And it's an intermittent offering that focuses on marriage coaching for people in healthcare. Because all of these same approaches and solutions that we're going to talk about today, whether they are for charting or leadership or your clinic or how to work with colleagues, they also apply to our relationships. And many of the same challenges that get us into trouble there get us into trouble in our personal lives as well, parenting and intimate relationships. And then I offer free Zoom and yoga YouTube, and I would love to have you join me because a lot of the topics I bring up there as well. And when you are relaxed, you are much better able to hear some of these things and integrate them. It is also one of the reasons that we offer mindful moments at the end of these sessions to help you practice mindfulness, to help you upregulate your parasympathetic nervous system so you have more access to it when you need it. So with that, what I'm going to talk about today is a tiny slice of all of that, but it is specifically about how intention and how your physiology and physiologic awareness can make decision-making simpler, more efficient, and less expensive emotionally and energetically, because decisions make our lives a lot harder, or a lack of decisions. And we are so tired in healthcare because our decision-making processes are expensive and we make a ton of decisions. There's an invisible cost of all the decisions we make. And I would say the decisions that we don't make, the decision debt of the ones that we feel challenged to make. And so overall, as physicians, we are exceptional decision makers. We make 90%, 99% really good decision. We have a ton of knowledge and we weigh risks and benefits. But the problem isn't that. The problem is our emotional and physiologic state and the state of the systems around us. So the problem in our decision making is not the knowledge that we have or ability to make decisions. It's because we are depleted, because we are reactive, and because we are under so much pressure. And we bring this because we are making constant decisions around emails, charting, messages, meeting, conversations. And all of these things require decisions about what to include, what to leave out, what to say, what not to say, how to advocate, how to close the loop. And all of our interactions involve decisions, whether with patients, colleagues, administration, your partner. And so they all have this cognitive, emotional, physiologic, and energetic cost. And because of our trained patterns, something that we talk about all the time in this podcast, and there are going to be podcasts on almost everything I'm about to mention: urgency, over-responsibility, perfectionism, fear of disappointing people, fear of making a mistake, judging ourselves and others, the idea that control is safety, doubting ourselves, hypervigilance. All of these patterns make decision-making so much harder than it has to be, and so much more energetically draining. So I want you to pause here and just think, where do you feel that you drain energy in your day? Where are you wasting energy? And to take a moment to think about what energizes you, what depletes you, what holes could you plug? Are they those thought patterns? Are they habits? Are they stories? This is something that I focus on in coaching all the time. And it may be a bit hard to do sort of in your car or as you're walking, but this idea of energy management and energy conservation and growing capacity and energizing yourself, we can literally regenerate energy just like solar does, or batteries store energy. We can do this in ourselves, and it is a phenomenal tool. And so I want you to think a little bit about it. And if that inspires you, I strongly encourage you to just jump into coaching. It is a life-changing approach to moving through days where there's not enough time. We can't manage our time, but we can manage our energy. Well, we can manage our time to a degree, but in medicine, we don't have control of our time. And in parenting, we often don't have control of our time. When we are interacting with others, much of it's not in our control. But our energy and what we spend our energy on and where we ruminate, that's always in our control. And in my experience, it's something that those of us in medicine could do a much better job of. And I will humbly say that even though I'm aware of this, I also still could do a much better job. What I know now is that I notice, oh my God, these thoughts are just draining my energy. And I cannot make a decision when I'm tired. I also would encourage those of you listening, if decisions are challenging for you, episode, it's either 34 or 39, Decisions Can Be Simple, is an exceptional episode to re-listen to about decision making as well. And so what I want to offer here is this idea of reacting versus responding versus choosing intentionally when you are moving through your day and when you are making decisions. Since our days as humans are pretty much decision after decision after decision, whether it's what to eat for dinner, whether to exercise, what to do, who to see next, which thing to respond to first. So for the most part in medicine, we are trained to react. And reacting is actually pretty inefficient because when we're tired and when we react, we're not being thoughtful. We're not being intentional. We're not applying a filter. And we are revving up our nervous system to stay in fight or flight all the time. So previously, I've always suggested that we respond, not react. So pausing and then responding. And today I want to take that even another step higher and to say to choose your intention, choose your filter for responding or your approach. the tone and energy you want to live by or screen things through. And for some of us, it goes back to those words for the year. They are oftentimes the thing that I use as a filter. So using intention as a filter. Or sometimes they are things like love. So what would love do is a filter that I use to make decisions all the time. What would responsibility do? What would caring do? What would sustainability do? What would peace do? There's not always a right word. I generally use love. And when my TED Talks comes out, I really hope you'll all listen to it and listen to it all, because apparently that's what helps other people find it. I suggest you use love. It's simple if you have just one word, but it doesn't always work. And so for me, for example, I mentioned my words for the year, strategic and focused. What would strategic do? What would focus do? What would someone who felt wealthy do? This is the power of choosing an intention, letting that be your filter for decision making. You will notice that it gets you out of the mess in your brain. So normally when we react, reactions are driven by urgency. They're driven by fear. They're driven by conditioning. We want to get things done as fast as possible. And we're taught that if we don't react and we don't move fast, that something bad will happen. But there's a tremendous cost to this reactivity. When we are reactive, we often have a lot of things to fix. In fact, I'm increasingly having physicians come to me because there have been complaints about their reactivity or comments or communication. These are often the most well-meaning physicians who are reacting because they don't have any energy reserves. They're in their sympathomimetic fight or flight, and they care tremendously and want to try to fix things. And things honestly should be different so much of the time in the world today, especially. And so recognizing that rather than having to fix the mess and go back and send that apology email or fix the email or go back and forth or clean up the residue, or it generally creates a lot more work later when you react. Responding happens after a pause. It happens after mindfulness and awareness and noticing. And then choosing intentionally is the next up level. That also takes some time up front, but seconds up front saves hours later, saves energy downstream. And by keeping yourself aligned, it also saves energy. When we're out of alignment is where the energy drain happens. And so remembering that the biggest energy drain is actually not the volume. It's actually not the pace that we're moving at. It's the reacting without intention, and it's the decision debt, and it's those thought patterns that may not be being applied discerningly. Now, sometimes they're very helpful, but not always. So a moment here to pause, and you may even want to pause the podcast and ask yourself, where has reacting in the moment caused you problems? Where has it caused you more work for later? So why does having an intention rather than simply responding with care help? It matters because it's a filter or a lens, and it simplifies decisions, and it costs you less energy when you've decided in advance, because we very often don't know what's coming at us. So if we can have a default intention that we can just go back to, it makes things so much easier and flow so much better. So remembering that we're trained to react, and reacting is expensive. Responding is better, but intention is even better. So choosing the tone and energy, and I would say it slows the front end by 1 or 2% and probably saves 80% on the back end. Thinking about charting, if you have an intention around your chart, you don't over-explain, you don't obsess over all kinds of details and worrying about this and that. You put in it what is important for your intention, what's the purpose of the chart, and you move on. Same thing with emails. Choose your tone, have boundaries clarified about what you're going to talk about, and taking the emotion out of it, keeping it simple. What would love write? What would love say? What would love share? What would love not write? Same thing for meetings. Choosing with intention the energy you want to bring. choosing to be present. It's not about the agenda and all the things. The tone and energy and your intention are going to help you create an agenda that's simple, throw out all the stuff that's not important. And even as things might get derailed in a meeting, reminding yourself, what's the purpose of this meeting? Is it connection? Is it informing? Can be really, really helpful. And in clinical conversations, especially, you'll have fewer loops when you are clear about your intention in a particular patient encounter, maybe a feedback encounter, not for a patient, but with a colleague or a student. So when you know your intention, you ask yourself, what would love do? And many, many, many decisions are just made. They're not that complicated. Our brains overcomplicate them when we try not to make a mistake, make the best decision. Well, what is the best criteria? It gets so complicated and there's always conflicting things. And so when you are clear, the energy that you want to bring and the tone and energy you want to live by clarifies everything. So how might having an intention help you, whether it is with a patient encounter, feedback, approaching a complicated chart, talking to your kids, dinner, your whole day, a holiday, a weekend, a vacation, dinner out with a partner, a date. A conversation with your partner about something can be really, really helpful, especially if there's a topic that triggers you, like say money. As you all know, I find money triggering because I grew up in a space where everyone was worried about it. And so you can have an intention around money and that tone and energy you want to bring to it, how you want to feel when you engage with it. And it can help you make decisions that keep you out of that physiologic overwhelm and stuckness. So I call it the intention filter. So asking yourself, what is your intention? How do you want to show up? What tone and energy do you want to bring? What matters most right now? What would love do? Who do I want to be? Not what do I want to do, but who do I want to be? Who do I want to be remembered as? This can simplify so many decisions, whether they are career decisions, whether to stay or leave in a marriage. I will talk in a future episode about how not deciding or deciding not to decide can actually be one of the most helpful things in terms of managing your energy. But there is a cost to decision debt, but not if you're not making the decision, if you're just choosing to decide later. So your intention there might be patience or data collection, or pausing, reflecting, being thoughtful. So an intention, though, it's not a goal. It's not about controlling. It's not about anyone else's actions. It's an internal thing. And so it makes your decisions simpler. They're not slower. In fact, they're faster. They might even feel like a reaction because once you get used to this pattern, for me asking what would love do or what would care do, or for this year, there's a lot of what would strategic do, what would focus do, what would bold do, what would brave do. So you can have a bunch of words that you filter through because in a different setting, it's going to be helpful. And so I'm thinking if you're trying to make a decision about your career, what would peace do? What would someone who felt alive do? What would someone who was proud of her decisions now do? Can be really, really helpful. So potentially pause here again and ask yourself, is there something you need to decide? And run it through the filter. Love, peace, sustainability, caring. And when my TED Talk comes out, please, please, please listen to it. And I run through what would love do, where it came from, and why it works. It's fun. And I hope that it will be amazing and you'll all share it far and wide so that other people can learn this idea of intention. And while today's talk isn't focused on what would love do, that is a practice of applying an attention to decision making. And remembering that we were taught to make decisions using pros and cons, risks and benefits, evidence, data, logic, all of these things. And that has left us exhausted, depleted. And so what I would offer is love makes decisions. It doesn't disregard the data. It actually weaves it into all of the things. But when you are focusing on your intention, the answers become really clear really fast. It's kind of like a magic trick. However, it's often hard to apply the filter. And because we have been so trained to react, we miss out very often. And so many people find this actually much, much harder than it sounds. And so I wanted to talk a moment about prerequisites to making decisions simple and making decisions from a place of intention or a filter. You cannot filter things through a very specific intention if your nervous system is dysregulated. Nobody filters or chooses intention or pauses if they are in fight or flight or freeze. So you're going to react. And in medicine, we are always in fight or flight or freeze, pretty much. We're full of cortisol, we're full of adrenaline, we're full of norepinephrine. It's an urgent setting, and the conversations these days make it even more urgent, more threatening, and more full of fear. And so with that environment and being in fight or flight, our nervous system is completely dysregulated, most of us. This is why I blend mindfulness and yoga into everything I do, why I encourage you to come on a retreat, why you should do my free yoga on YouTube or Zoom. And sometimes people say, well, working with you is expensive. Yes, it is, because what I offer is awesome, by the way. So hard to say that. I'm going with my bold and brave. However, I do offer tons of free stuff. So join me for yoga, listen to this podcast, get started, and know that that's just the beginning. But what happens when you are dysregulated is that you have very narrowed thinking. It's hard to see solutions. You feel stuck. We drop into feeling defensive. We drop into victimhood, which is one of the most common thought patterns I see in people who come to coach with me. They don't even realize they're dropping into victimhood. And it's very hard to get out of victimhood. And we do not advocate well from victimhood. So if you want to be an effective advocate, or you want to write clear, simple charts, or you want to advocate for yourself or ask for something, it's part of the reason why we have been so ineffectual in advocating for ourselves in medicine. Dysregulated nervous system leads us to catastrophizing. It leads us to people pleasing. It leads to lack of boundaries. When you are dysregulated, we just don't have boundaries. So when we pause and when we show up with a more regulated nervous system, we can bring these things in. So what I would suggest is to work on your parasympathetic nervous system. Go to yoga. Use a headspace or Calm or something. Join me, and I can help anybody practice mindfulness. Come on a retreat, and I practice all the ways of mindfulness so people can find something that works for them. I know so many people find it hard to meditate, and there are a zillion other ways to do this. You can start with our mindful moments. You can, there's just so many options. I'll just leave it at that. And this isn't about calming down in the moment. It's even more than a pause. It's about training your nervous system. What you practice grows. But before you respond and calm your nervous system, before you can apply the filter, calm your nervous system. So a couple of things you can try. Simple, simple, simple. Let your exhale be longer than your inhale. I encourage you to go back to today's yoga class called Grow Capacity. It was released on January 11th, and you'll learn a bit about having a longer exhale than inhale. It activates your parasympathetic nervous system. Grounding does. We practice grounding in today's practice as well, and I practice it in all my practices and in retreats, etc. Softening your shoulders, noticing your feet on the floor. It works for people. It seems silly, and when you practice it in the moment, before you go into a meeting or before you make a decision, you will find you have so much more clarity. And the answers are simple, much more simple. They're not always simple, but the next step might be simple. And you'll have clarity. So prerequisite number 2, not making decisions when you're depleted on empty, below empty. We react. We have no capacity. So this is the capacity issue. You can't move through life with an intention with no capacity. So an intention can grow your capacity, but you need capacity to set the intention. And so you have to start somewhere. This is where setting yourself up for success is helpful. And this isn't like go to yoga and build your capacity. And if you don't have capacity, what's wrong with you? This is physiologic training. And in healthcare, we're trained in physiology. So use your physiology strategically and grow your bandwidth, grow your capacity. So just be aware. It's not self-care. It's growing your capacity. And we all need to grow our capacity. I think we like to think we have a limited capacity, and that doesn't fit. And you can use that as a strategy sometimes, but you also want to work to grow it. You want to plug the holes and do things like work on your nervous system. A regulated nervous system grows your capacity. Also, choose to make decisions when you're not tired. Manage your energy well so that you don't get below empty. And energy management is so important, more important than time management. It's something that I work with people on individually in coaching. It will change your life. It's in your control. Time is not in your control in medicine and in most of life, especially if you have children or toddlers. Some of it is. But mostly when you have energy, that's when you can be strategic, focused, intentional, and make thoughtful decisions. So, prerequisite number 3 is to not be mean to yourself. I call it indecision making. It looks a little bit different. Have your own back. So, indecision comes from self-doubt, generally, not from lack of information. In fact, people who listen to this podcast probably have too much information. We've weighed all the risks and benefits. We thought of all the permutations and pros and cons and pluses and minuses and researched the benefits and risks and all the things. It's not an information problem. It's a doubt problem. It's a lack of self-trust. And to recognize, remember, we were taught not to trust ourselves. If you go back to a previous episode of this podcast about trust, there is a whole 45 minutes about how we were taught not to trust ourselves, not to trust others, not to trust the process. So self-trust, lack of self-trust is our default. And also, beating ourselves up, criticizing ourselves is our default. And so then decisions are dangerous because we don't trust ourselves. And then if we make the quote unquote wrong decision, we'll be mean to ourselves. And so this idea of having your own back is one of the tools that I teach in Transition Well. It's so important. It's actually important for leaders too. But when you make a decision, you just own it. It's your decision. You have your own back. You don't say, I should have made that one because of X, Y, or Z. That makes it a bad decision. You can't know the outcome when you make a decision. It's a good decision based on the criteria you feed in. And I don't know a woman in healthcare medicine who doesn't feed too much information into the decision-making algorithm. And so when you have your own back, it makes decision-making safe. And when you use your intention to make a decision, it makes having an intention safe. So don't beat yourself up. And remembering, and this is what I might call prerequisite number 4 for simple decision-making and making decisions from intention, that whether it's a good decision has nothing to do with the outcome. Outcome is not related to the quality of decisions. We conflate something bad happening with a bad decision. It has nothing to do with failure. It has nothing to do with it being a bad decision. There's always other things involved. And again, this is something to delve into in a different podcast, but recognizing there's so many factors out of our control, even in healthcare. And so interesting because we do have our backs on some decisions. Like I would just say in peds, we have our backs on antibiotic decisions. If the first one doesn't work, it was resistant, wasn't a bad decision for the most part, but generally we don't have our back. And so can you recognize that a good decision is when it aligns with your intention, when you made it with a healthy nervous system, and when you made it with some capacity, it wasn't reactive, then it's a good decision. You weighed the risks and benefits to the best of your ability, but for the most part, you made it with intention, with something that matters, your values, and let that be a good decision. Then you can have your own back. You can make another decision later. This is true for career pivots, for so many things. So focus on your intention, focus on your nervous system. So I want to put all this together before I close out with what I consider the most skipped question, which is, how do I want to show up? We don't ask this. And I will amuse you all that my husband says he hates this question because I ask it all the time. And he's like, what does it mean to show up? And so what I mean by showing up is the tone and energy you want to bring. Be purposeful. So we often say, what should the agenda be? What do I want to say? What don't I want to forget to say? And, as I outline a podcast, for example, I actually kind of do that. Like, what do I need to say? What do I want to miss? But if I go to the intention of what do I want to share and why, what's the why and what's the energy I want to bring? It turns out, well, even if I forget half of it, There's always another chance. There's always another podcast. There's always another yoga class. And we get stuck on the good or bad, release the cortisol, and then our brain and our vision, our decision-making capacity decrease, and nothing good comes there. So choosing how you want to show up rather than what you want to say. So the most skipped question, how do I want to show up? What tone and energy do I want to bring? What internal physiologic state do I want to bring? And how do I need to set myself up for success? That's your energy. So thinking about meetings, we always want to think we want the other people to feel valued or feel safe. I'm like, value yourself, feel safe yourself. You want them to feel calm, be calm. You show up as you. You own how you show up. You show up intentionally. And choosing a single word or one or two can be just a lifesaver in this situation. And to recognize also, all the time in medicine and in leadership school, and I have been to leadership school and many a leadership training. And what I think is most important that we do not pay any attention to is nervous systems, our own. And then our own interacts with the nervous system of others. We co-regulate with other people. And so we're taught, we want them to feel valued. We want them to feel safe. Well, you have to feel valued and feel safe. If you want them to have a regulated nervous system, you have to show up with a regulated nervous system. And if they don't, which most of the time they don't, you also have to recognize that that's going to co-regulate with your nervous system. And so one of the things that I talk a lot about in decision-making and leaderships and transitions is this idea of a regulated nervous system. That needs a whole other podcast. But to recognize that choosing an intentional tone and energy is not about controlling other people. It's about controlling how you show up, because that's in your control. And that's going to interweave with how everyone else shows up. But all you can control is that. And it's the same thing with decisions. All you can control is how you show up, the filter and the energy you want to bring and you want behind it. And so there's a lot of energy around that. That's a topic for a whole other conversation, how to choose an intention. And that is a full topic of a workshop in the Leading with Heart and at retreats and some of the leadership workshops that I do far and wide. But pay attention to the intention you want to bring, because that's what you can bring. Pay attention to what you don't want to bring, because that's also in your control. And to recognize that we are leaders, whether we are the official leader of the department or the leader of the medical group or a CMO or, we have a zillion letters of leadership in healthcare. And any physician, you're a leader in the room with your patients. And women are emotional leaders in their household, usually in their marriages, usually as moms and parents, if you have children. And daughters are often leaders with aging parents in the sibling situation, eldest daughters in particular. And so take good care of yourself first, because the energy you bring and the intention you choose is going to set everyone up for a better experience. And make your decisions from that same intention. Be consistent, be aligned. It's pretty powerful stuff. So as I close out the podcast, think about what energy you most want to bring this week. What energy have you been bringing that you don't want to bring anymore? What situations would choosing an intention saving the most energy? My invitation here is keep it simple. Maybe it's dinner. Maybe it's dropping your kids off or picking them up. Maybe it's a vacation. And my favorite question, how might what would love do simplify decision-making? And what can you do to respond, not react, and set yourself up physiologically to have an intention? Feel free to send me an email with your answers if you want. It's fun. And a reminder that this is not about being nicer, doing more, lowering your standards. It's not about you having done something wrong. It's literally strategic planning. And reducing friction and protecting your energy, managing your energy is sustainable. Intention simplifies everything. You make better decisions when you are not in threat or depletion. A good decision is an aligned decision, aligned with your intention. And you always have a choice in how you show up. So this is one of those sort of teaching episodes. I hope it's been fun. And this is the kind of work I do with physicians every day. Personalizing it is the best way to do it, helping you make aligned decisions. And groups are amazing ways to do it because you can watch other people do it and have a lot of clarity and borrow from their approaches as well. But one-on-one is also awesome. Retreats are also awesome. I would love to see you somewhere. And I would love to help you learn this approach of showing up with intention, filtering with intention, and letting go of some of the energetic drains, remembering that intention is a filter for simpler decisions. Thanks a million for listening. I look forward to seeing you guys all very soon. If you have questions about working with me or any of the upcoming groups, simply send me an email. And I would love to see you at yoga, if it so inspires, or in person in Nicasio in 2026, if that inspires. May you all be well, and may you all make at least one decision from what would love do this week.
Thanks for listening. If our message resonates, we'd love to connect further. Join us for coaching, mindfulness experiences, workshops, and retreats. Invite us to speak at your institution or conference. When you work with us, you don't just consume information, you create real change. Find me, Chang Liang, at Awakened Breath, and Jessie Mahoney at Pause and Presence.
Welcome to today's mindful moment, a moment to think about intention, a moment to pause and be present and choose. Taking in a big deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. Bring a hand to heart and another hand to top, pressing the heel of your hand into the heart space and releasing some oxytocin. Noticing how your body responds. Showing up with intention physiologically. Less cortisol, more oxytocin, more oxygen, some slowness and space. Taking another breath and an exhale. Taking a moment to think about the filter you might like to use for your decision-making going forward. What would you like to feel more of? What would you like the energy behind your decisions to come from? What would you like to be the driving force in your life? No need to overcomplicate it. Could be kindness, connection, healing, love, peace, care. Allowing whatever comes to mind to come to mind. How would you like to show up in your life? What energy would you like to bring? And how could you let that inform your decision-making process? Taking a couple more deep breaths, sitting with this, whatever comes up, seeing if you can show up without striving and without judgment. Simply with kindness, honesty, vulnerability, trust, and love for yourself and for the world around you. Taking in another big deep breath, sealing in whatever intention and energy you chose. Allowing it to be a simple filter as you move forward. Acknowledging how it might, from a place of hope, leave you with more energy, conserve energy, and make decisions more simple. Taking one more moment here, pondering whatever energy came to mind that you would like to choose as your intention going forward. And noticing for a moment the physiology that you have in your body in this moment, how good it feels. Wishing yourself well. Wishing all of your future decisions well. Wishing yourself a life of more peace, ease, love, kindness, and clarity. Taking in one more delicious deep breath for the road. Opening eyes, coming back into this space. And have an amazing day. Thank you all so much for practicing with me today.